I will never forget the moment my sister leaned over my daughter's hospital bed and murmured, "Maybe it's better if she doesn't survive. Her mother is a curse." The monitor kept time like a metronome, beeping steady and obscene against those words. Someone gasped. A clipboard clattered to the floor. My 7-year-old son stopped coloring and lifted his head. It took only that cold sentence to redraw every boundary I had for love, loyalty, and what I thought family meant. The day had already broken us. Now it was going to test what remained. My name is Rachel Carter, 34, and for 2 years I have been a single mother in an apartment that fit our lives, if not our dreams. Melody, 9, wanted to be a marine biologist because she loved dolphins with an intensity that turned science into prayer. Bryce, almost 8 as he insists, has sandy hair that refuses to obey gray eyes that notice everything, and a quiet that people mistake for shyness. It isn't shyness, it is precision. He listens the way a mechanic listens to an engine, hearing what's wrong beneath what's obvious. The Saturday before everything shattered, we sang over a homemade chocolate cake with wonky candles, a birthday melody declared perfect because we were together. She fell asleep that night clutching Peanut, her stuffed elephant, and I went to bed believing effort and love could hold up a life. Tuesday started with permission slips and a packed lunch, the kind with apple slices I'd washed with lemon so they wouldn't brown. Melody hugged me at 7 a.m., backpack bright with rainbow patches we'd sewn to hide the worn spots. "Love you more, Mom," she said as the door closed behind her. At 10 a.m., the phone rang with a voice I didn't recognize, telling me there had been an accident, a pickup truck running a red light, a minivan folding around the passenger side where my daughter sat. I do not remember the drive to Children's Hospital, only the smell of antiseptic, the calm of a nurse who took me by the shoulders when they wouldn't let me see Melody because surgeons were trying to keep her alive. 9 hours later, the head of pediatric trauma, Dr. Harrison, told me she was stable for now, in an induced coma, to give her brain room to heal the next 72 hours critical. Words like intracranial pressure and ventilator and fracture hung in the fluorescent light, while the child who still slept with a stuffed elephant lay too still under a forest of lines and machines. News travels faster than mercy. Lisa arrived first, heels clicking like punctuation hair, perfect perfume, expensive arms offering the kind of hug you accept because it's expected. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll handle everything." That sentence should have warned me. Lisa makes handling sound like caring, but it's really control wrapped in silk. Todd, my brother, came next, straight from a construction site with dust on his boots and an embrace that felt like home. My mother, Gloria, followed in a wheelchair, cheeks set in worried lines that have deepened since she moved in with Lisa after Dad's heart attack. Aunts and cousins filled the air with concern that echoed but did not settle. I caught whispers when they thought I wasn't listening, glances traded like notes in a classroom. The circle around Melody's bed looked like support, but something sour threaded through it. Bryce rooted himself in the chair beside me with his coloring book open and the crayons we'd chosen together at the dollar store. Hospital rules bent around his steadiness. Dr. Harrison waved him through with a soft, "Okay, champ," as if he understood that Bryce's silence had purpose. My son colored superheroes and race cars, while his ears gathered everything the room spilled. Late on day 3, hope and caffeine failed me at the same time. I was telling Melody about the beach we would visit when she got better, how the sand squeaks under your feet when it's very dry, and my forehead drifted to the blanket by her arm. The machines kept time. My body switched off. I woke to hush, not the reverent quiet of prayer, but the tilt of voices meant to avoid my notice. Lisa's tone had the crispness of a sales pitch. Look at her. Rachel has always been bad luck. First the divorce, then the job loss. Now this. Maybe it's better if Melody doesn't survive. Her mother is a curse. A small tongue of cold licked my spine. I kept my eyes closed. Aunt Paula murmured about burdens and bankruptcies. Uncle Jerome spoke the language of insurance kindness framed as cost-benefit. They talked about outcomes as if compassion were a ledger. Lisa had a plan she always does, an attorney named Martin, documentation of my shortcomings, secondhand clothes, mac and cheese dinners, a neighbor who watches the kids for $10 an hour. She spoke about Bryce as if he were a scholarship waiting to be claimed, promising private school and stability if a judge agreed I was unfit. In the corner of my vision, Bryce's hand stilled. His crayon did not move. The boy who listens had heard enough to make a map. I learned that betrayal has a sound. It is the rustle of a purse zipper when Lisa thought I was sleeping, the hush of relatives sliding toward agreement, because certainty is seductive. It is also the soft drag of Bryce's sneaker soles on linoleum as he stood. Dr. Harrison entered then with residents and a nurse named Stephanie, whose kindness could be felt before it was seen. Lisa stepped in front of me, offering to speak on my behalf in the hall. Actually, this concerns Melody's treatment. Dr. Harrison said gentle, but firm, and I opened my eyes, sat up, and found my voice waiting where I dropped it. He explained a surgical option, decompressive craniectomy with duroplasty, its risks, its promise. The only option that mattered to me was the one that kept my daughter alive. Lisa countered with euphemisms about quality of life. Paula added fairness to Bryce. Jerome added cost. The room tilted toward a vote I had not called. Bryce let his coloring book fall. The sound was small, decisive. "Aunt Lisa, should I tell everyone what you did when Mom was asleep?" he asked, and the air changed as surely as weather. Bryce didn't flinch when every adult in the room turned toward him. He walked to the foot of Melody's bed as if it were a podium, and the beeping monitors were his metronome. His voice was calm and high and sure all at once, the sound of a child who knows the difference between being quiet and being silenced. He said he had seen Lisa unzip my purse while I slept and take photos of my bills, the shutoff notice I had already fixed by working extra shifts, the bank statements, and insurance letters. Lisa laughed brittle and thin, claiming she was helping me manage finances. Bryce blinked once and asked why, if that were true, she had called a man named Martin right after and told him to start paperwork proving I was unfit. The resident stopped tapping tablets. Stephanie took half a step closer to Bryce with the instinct of someone who recognizes courage, even when it stands 4 feet tall. He lifted the cracked iPhone I had given him months ago, the one that held a charge just long enough for games and photos. He said that when words kept stinging, he did what he had watched me do for years, with receipts and forms, document important things. He pressed play. Lisa's voice spilled into the room, unmistakable in its cadence. She spoke of proving incompetence, of securing custody of both children of survivor benefits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars from Dennis, who she revealed had died in a small plane crash 5 weeks earlier. She bragged about being named secondary guardian years ago and about timing about telling me at the appropriate time. The words were a match tossed on dry grass. My knees went watery and Todd caught me. The name hit harder than money. Dennis was gone. He had been alive in our heads and on the edges of our sentences, a man who had left to find himself a disappointment, kept at a manageable distance. Now he was a fact. We had not been given a loss. We hadn't been allowed to grieve. Lisa's face drained of color. She started to shape a defense, and Bryce, who had more to say, cued a second clip. Lisa coaxing him to say he wanted to live with her if anything happened, promising a room and a pool, and the vague loveliness of anything you want, calling our apartment unfit for a boy with potential. On the recording, Bryce asked, "What about Mom and Lisa?" Answered that I would understand eventually. There in the real room, Bryce lowered the phone and said he understood right now. He said love was not measured in square footage or brand names, and that weakness was not a mother who made lunches with notes and read until her voice went hoarse. Weakness was not seeing what mattered. For a breath-long silence, no one moved. Then Aunt Paula, who had been nodding along to Lisa's earlier calculations, stepped away, as if the air around my sister had turned caustic. Uncle Jerome found his voice and used the word money without dressing it up. Vera, my cousin and nurse who speaks bluntly because lives hinge on clarity, said what we were all thinking, that Lisa's concern had been an investment strategy in grief's clothing. My mother's hands shook on her walker. She said Lisa's full name the way mothers do when they are reaching for the child they raised inside the adult who stands before them. Security appeared in the doorway when Dr. Harrison asked them to escort Lisa from the pediatric ICU. Lisa thrashed her arguments against the frame of the room, but they had lost their shine. She was removed to the hall, her heels ticking like a clock that no longer counted for us. The stillness after she left felt earned. I thanked Bryce without words because my mouth wouldn't shape enough gratitude. He pressed his small palm to Melody's blanketed shin as if he were returning a flag from a battle he had chosen not to start, but knew how to end. Dr. Harrison cleared the hush and returned to the reason he had come. He described the surgery again slower now that chaos had been pushed back from the bed. Decompressive craniectomy with duroplasty, temporary removal of a section of skull so swelling could stop stealing what it had no right to take reconstruction to follow. He gave numbers without melodrama risks that were real possibilities, that were not promises, but were not fantasies either. I looked at Melody's lashes resting on her cheeks and saw her running on wet sand turquoise jersey, bright as soccer ball skimming ahead of her toes. I said we would do it. I said we would stand with whatever came after. Consent forms multiplied under my pen. Todd read each line like a man checks a beam before he climbs it. My mother wheeled herself to the chapel and folded into prayer with a ferocity that made me remember the woman who used to defend me without checking a ledger. Relatives scattered their phones, buzzing with group chats that had not protected them from seeing themselves. Bryce stayed planted beside me, serious and small and formidable. We watched orderlies ease Melody's bed toward the doors that lead to a place where hope and skill share a ceiling. At 1 p.m., the elevator closed on my daughter's face, pale and beautiful and stubborn, under tape and tubing. The hour after she went in lasted a year. I paced in a rectangle until the tiles felt familiar under my shoes, then sat, then stood again as if motion could braid itself into a blessing. Todd bought coffee that tasted like scorched earth and handed it to me because rituals matter, even when they do not help. Bryce leaned against my arm and asked if dolphins sleep with one eye open. I told him they do, and he nodded as if that made perfect sense, as if Melody had already chosen to be the kind of creature who kept watch even in rest. We breathed in sync for a while. At 3 p.m., Bryce said he had not been brave, only honest, and that sometimes adults mistake quiet for agreement. I told him he had changed the direction of the day. He said the day needed changing. Around 4 p.m., Dr. Harrison called from the operating room to say the first most delicate part had gone as planned, the bone flap secured for later reconstruction, the brain already showing response. He gave no victory speech, which somehow steadied me more than optimism would have. At 6 p.m., he walked toward us, still in Scrub's mask hanging, and the weariness on his face had been replaced by something like light. He said the pressure had eased, that Melody's brain had room again, that the next 2 days would still be steep, but we were climbing instead of falling. I folded into a chair. Bryce clambered into my lap for the first time in months, all elbows and courage and childhood. Todd leaned his big hand on my shoulder and let out a breath that sounded like a man setting down a weight he had carried for too long. Night settled in layers. Machines hummed like distant crickets. Stephanie adjusted lines and smiled the kind of smile nurses learn, which is both ordinary and holy. I laid my cheek on Melody's hand and imagined the ocean she loves, the curve of a dolphin breaking the surface and sliding back into blue, the body made to breathe air and live in water, two worlds negotiated without apology. I told her in a whisper that we had chosen to fight, that her brother had thrown truth like a rope and pulled us all back from an edge we hadn't known how to name. I did not say Lisa's name. Names don't matter in the dark as much as promises do. I promised we were not done. I promised we would go to the beach when she was ready and let the waves stitch a new seam across our fear. Melody opened her eyes 2 mornings later. The light in the ICU was pale and soft, filtering through blinds, like the first hint of dawn after too long in darkness. I had been tracing circles on her hand when her fingers twitched beneath mine. Her eyelids fluttered, and then those gray-blue eyes, Dennis's eyes, found me. Her voice was a whisper scraped raw from the ventilator, but it was music. Mom. The second word she spoke was Bryce. He was already at her bedside, careful not to touch any wires. I heard you, she murmured, her lips curving faintly. You stood up for us. He blinked fast, trying not to cry. You're my hero, she said, and in that moment every sleepless hour, every prayer that felt unanswered came rushing back as light instead of pain. Bryce shook his head, tears escaping now. I just told the truth. Dr. Harrison was at the doorway, smiling like a man who had witnessed something larger than science. He said Melody's recovery was promising, that her brain was responding far beyond what they dared hope. I thanked him, but he shook his head. Your son deserves some credit. Not many 7-year-olds remind a room full of adults what truth sounds like. The next weeks unfolded like slow dawn. Melody moved from ICU to recovery learning to walk again with physical therapy, her small body wobbling but determined. Bryce was at every session, counting steps, cheering softly. Todd fixed the wobbly legs on our thrift store table and started showing up every evening, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with silence, both equally welcome. Mom called daily from the senior community she'd moved into after leaving Lisa's house, her voice smaller but steadier. I'm so sorry, Rachel, she said once, and I believed her. I let Lisa make me forget what love looks like when it isn't wrapped in luxury. Can you forgive a foolish old woman? I told her there was nothing to forgive. The only thing I wanted was her voice at the other end of the line. Lisa's voice, however, had become a headline. When the police investigated the recordings, they uncovered more fraudulent property transfers, elderly clients scammed out of savings, a paper trail of greed stretching years. Her real estate license was revoked, and she faced charges for fraud and attempted custody interference. Some relatives tried to defend her, saying she'd lost herself to grief and envy. Others stopped answering her calls entirely. I didn't hate her. Hate felt like an anchor, and I needed to move forward. Dennis's lawyer, Mr. Garrett, reached out a few days after Melody's first steps. He told me what Lisa's recording had hinted at. Dennis had died in a plane crash 5 weeks earlier, sober and working toward earning his pilot's license. He handed me an envelope worn at the edges addressed in Dennis's handwriting. Inside was a letter meant for Melody's birthday. The paper trembled as I read his apology, his confession that he had left, not because he stopped loving us, but because he couldn't love himself. He'd been in therapy, rebuilding, dreaming of reconciling. The life insurance and small plane settlement together amounted to nearly $500,000, all intended for the children with me as trustee unless a court deemed me unfit. My breath caught. Dennis had built a safety net. Lisa had tried to steal it. Mr. Garrett said quietly, "He wanted to protect you even when he couldn't be here. He believed you'd raise them right." That money didn't feel like fortune. It felt like closure wrapped in sorrow. We used part of it to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just enough space for both kids to have their own rooms and a yard where the grass grew unevenly, but honestly. Melody painted her walls turquoise, the color of ocean water under sunlight. Bryce chose gray, claiming it helped him think. On moving day, Todd grilled burgers while the kids ran barefoot through the sprinklers, laughing. For the first time in years, laughter didn't sound borrowed. At night, when the boxes were mostly unpacked and the house smelled of cardboard and rain, Bryce climbed into my lap again like he used to. "Mom," he said, "Dr. Harrison told me heroes are the people who tell the truth, even when it's scary." I smiled, brushing his hair back. "He's right." He frowned a little. "But I think heroes also fix broken things, even when they didn't break them." His words hit somewhere deep, the place where exhaustion and gratitude share space. "Then I guess we're all heroes," I said, "because we're fixing this together." Melody's first day back at school came 6 months later. She wore her soccer jersey under her jacket, still walking with a slight limp, but grinning anyway. The coach said she could help as assistant until she was stronger, but she insisted on playing. "I didn't survive brain surgery to sit on the sidelines," she announced. Watching her chase the ball, slow but determined, I thought about how many kinds of strength there are. The strength to fight for breath, the strength to forgive, and the quiet kind like Bryce's that changes everything without shouting. That spring, Bryce's class held a My Hero presentation. Most kids picked firefighters or superheroes. Bryce, in his neatly pressed shirt and 2 big shoes, spoke into a microphone almost as tall as him. "My heroes are my mom and my sister," he said. "Heroes aren't people who never fall down. They're people who get back up every time. My mom gets up at 5 every morning to make breakfast before work. My sister got up from a coma that should have killed her. And sometimes being a hero means telling the truth when everyone else is scared to hear it." His teacher cried quietly in the back of the room. So did I. That night, after tucking them both into their new beds, Melody asked Mom, "Why did Aunt Lisa do all that? Didn't she love us?" I took a breath, smoothing her hair. Sometimes sweetheart people let greed and jealousy make them forget who they are. Aunt Lisa saw our love and wanted it, but she tried to take it instead of earn it. Bryce, half asleep across the room, mumbled, "She forgot that family isn't about money. It's about showing up and telling the truth, even when it's scary." Melody nodded. "Especially when it's scary." In the dark, I watched them drift into sleep, my 2 reminders that resilience can grow in the hardest soil. Lisa's schemes, Dennis's mistakes, even my own exhaustion, had all led here to this small safe house, to laughter echoing off fresh paint, to a family rebuilt, not on luck or wealth, but on truth. If you've ever doubted the power of honesty or the strength of love, remember this. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths, and courage doesn't always roar. It simply refuses to be silent. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories about courage, love, and the strength of family. Don't forget to leave a comment about what part resonated most with you. Until next time, take care and remember that love defended by truth can survive anything.